Good evening. Well, last Saturday once again saw appalling scenes in London. I'll show you some shots of that in just a minute. But to get some context about the big row that is going on, a huge debate whether the march through London past the cenotaph should be banned on Armistice Day. Right, let's get our facts in a row straight here. Saturday is the 11th of November. That is the actual anniversary of the armistice on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. It's something that in the last few years has been commemorated with, for example, train stations stopping, minutes silence being observed in offices. But our national act of commemoration takes place on the nearest Sunday to Armistice Day, and that, of course, will happen on Sunday, the 12th. Right, the first thing to clear up is there is no planned march or protest that will take place on the Sunday, our national act of commemoration, when the King, of course, will lay a wreath at the cenotaph. But the whole weekend is one of remembrance. And Armistice Day itself, the 11th, as I said to you, has recently taken on more significance. And what has been planned by those that organise these marches, a coalition of groups, they originally wanted to have a 1 million-man march on that very day that we choose every year to remember the great sacrifices that have been made for our freedom. To call that insensitive would be an understatement. Something else that needs clearing up is the route of the proposed march. Now, they're not going to get 1 million people, but they may well have 70 to 100,000. But, to be clear, the march will not go past the cenotaph. Let's have a look at the map, and this map shows you the proposed route, and it begins in Hyde Park, it finishes up at the American Embassy. It does not go directly, this will not go directly past the cenotaph. But it'll go close enough. And here's the point. The real point is that this is the 11th of November we're talking about. Just look at what happened to those that were out for the Royal British Legion on Charing Cross Station last Saturday afternoon. There they were, absolutely surrounded. Now, they put on a pretty phlegmatic performance in the middle of all of this, but I've no doubt they must have felt pretty intimidated. That picture, I think, is an absolute disgrace. That picture tells us that for all the much vaunted talk of the huge success we have made in this country, the huge success we've made in terms of multiculturalism, the whole thing is a massive success, we can see here in our country we have a significant number of people with whom we have no shared history, with whom we have no shared culture, and who, it seems, have absolutely no respect whatsoever for our ways, our customs, our traditions, or indeed our national act of commemoration. The vast majority of the British public do not think this march should go ahead on Armistice Day. And yet, between the police and the government, nothing is getting done. Now, about an hour ago, the Deputy Assistant Commissioner, Aid Adelican at the Met Police, said the risk of violence and disorder linked to breakaway groups is growing. This is of concern ahead of a significant and busy weekend in the capital. Our message to organisers is clear. Please, we ask you to urgently reconsider. It is not appropriate to hold any protests in London this weekend. We urgently ask you to reconsider. And what do we get from the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister? Well, of course, Suella's very good at denouncing these marches as hate marches. But given we have the Public Order Act, it is not beyond the wit of man for the police and the government to actually show some courage and some leadership and to do what most of us think is the right and appropriate thing. And yet, I'm afraid, we're led by gutless people who are not prepared to do this and who allow events to overtake us. Maybe that'll change between now and the end of the week. But right now, it's as if the police are saying to the government, you decide, and the government is saying to the police, you decide. The law, as it fairly clearly states, it needs the Met to recommend the march should be stopped for the Home Secretary to act.